It's a fair question, right? If evolution is all about survival of the fittest, if it's this relentless process that weeds out the weak and promotes the strong, then why are we still so fragile? Why are there thousands of diseases written into our very code, passed down from parent to child like some terrible inheritance? Shouldn't evolution have fixed these bugs by now? It seems like a major flaw in the system. The truth is, this question gets right to the heart of what evolution actually is and what it isn't. We tend to imagine evolution as a purposeful, intelligent designer, always striving for perfection. We think of it like an engineer who sees a problem, designs a solution, and improves the machine. But that's not how it works at all. Evolution is blind. It has no goals. It has no foresight. It's just a process. It's the simple, messy outcome of three things: variation, inheritance, and selection. Some organisms are a little different from their parents. They pass those differences on. And some of those differences happen to help them survive and have more kids in their specific environment. That's it. When you look at it through that lens, as a blind, short-sighted process, the persistence of genetic diseases starts to make a lot more sense. They aren't a failure of evolution, they are a direct and logical consequence of how it operates. There isn't one single reason they stick around, there are many reasons, all tangled up together. One of the biggest reasons is simply a matter of timing. Natural selection is brutally effective at getting rid of traits that harm you during your reproductive years. If a genetic disease kills a child before they can grow up and have their own children, that gene has a very hard time getting passed on. It's a dead end. Selection pressure against it is immense. But what if a disease doesn't show up until you're 40 or 50 or 60? By then, you've likely already had your kids. You've already passed your genes to the next generation. As far as evolution is concerned, your job is done. Think of it like a car warranty. The manufacturer guarantees the car will run well for the first 100,000 miles. They will spend a lot of time and money fixing any problems that pop up before that milestone. But if the engine completely falls apart at 100,001 miles, the manufacturer doesn't care. The car made it through the warranty period. Evolution's warranty period is your reproductive lifespan. Huntington's disease is a perfect, tragic example of this. It's a devastating neurological condition caused by a single dominant gene. If you have the gene, you will get the disease. It causes a slow, cruel breakdown of the brain, leading to uncontrolled movements, cognitive decline, and eventually death. But the symptoms usually don't start until a person is in their 30s, 40s, or 50s. By that point, many people with the gene have already had children, and each of their children had a 50-50 chance of inheriting it. The gene has already slipped through to the next generation before it ever makes the parents sick. Natural selection is essentially blind to it. It's a ghost that doesn't appear until after the party is over. The same logic applies to many other conditions. Genes like BRCA1 and BRCA2 significantly increase the risk of breast and ovarian cancer. But again, this risk typically translates into cancer later in life, often after a person has had children. So the genes persist. Many of the genetic predispositions for heart disease or Alzheimer's fall into this category as well. For most of human history, living to be 70 or 80 was incredibly rare. Most people died from infection, starvation, or violence long before these late-onset genetic conditions had a chance to manifest. So there was never strong pressure to weed them out. We are now victims of our own success. Modern medicine and sanitation allow us to live long enough to experience the diseases that evolution never had a reason to care about. Then there's the fact that many genetic diseases are sneaky. They can hide. Most genes come in pairs. You get one copy from your mother and one from your father. Some genes are dominant, meaning you only need one copy to show the trait. Huntington's is like that, but many others are recessive. This means you need two copies of the faulty gene to actually get sick. If you only have one copy, you're a carrier. You don't have the disease, you are perfectly healthy. But you carry the hidden gene and you can pass it on. This is a brilliant hiding strategy. Natural selection can't see the gene in a carrier because it isn't causing any harm. A person can live a long, healthy life, have lots of kids, and pass that recessive gene on without anyone knowing. It's only when two carriers happen to have a child together that there's a problem. For each child they have, there's a 25% chance the child will get a bad copy from both of them and end up with the disease. There's a 50% chance the child will be a carrier just like them, and a 25% chance the child will get two good copies. Cystic fibrosis is a classic example. It's a serious disease that affects the lungs and digestive system. To get it, you need to inherit 2 copies of the faulty CFTR gene. In people of Northern European descent, about 1 in 25 people is a carrier. They are totally fine. They have no idea they are carrying it. But because the gene is so common in its hidden carrier state, every so often 2 carriers meet and have a child, and the disease appears, seemingly out of nowhere. This carrier mechanism means that even a very lethal recessive disease can persist in a population. As long as it's rare, the vast majority of its copies are safely hidden away in healthy carriers, invisible to natural selection. The gene just keeps getting passed along, generation after generation, a silent passenger in our DNA. Tay sense is another brutal example. It's a recessive disease that destroys the nervous system in infants, usually causing death by age 4. Selection against the disease itself is as strong as it can possibly be. But it persists, especially in certain populations, because it hides in healthy carriers. Sometimes, though, the story gets even more complicated. Sometimes a bad gene isn't entirely bad. In certain situations, being a carrier for a genetic disease can actually be a good thing. It can provide a powerful survival advantage. This is called heterozygote advantage, and it's one of the most stunning examples of evolution's strange logic. The textbook case is sickle cell anemia. It's a recessive blood disorder common in people of African, Mediterranean, and South Asian descent. If you have 2 copies of the sickle cell gene, your red blood cells, which are normally round and flexible, become stiff and sickle-shaped. These misshapen cells can't carry oxygen well, and they get stuck in small blood vessels, causing intense pain, organ damage, and a shorter lifespan. It's a terrible disease. So why on earth is this gene so common in certain parts of the world? You would think natural selection would have wiped it out. The answer is one word: malaria. Malaria is a parasitic disease spread by mosquitoes, and for centuries it has been one of humanity's biggest killers, especially in tropical regions. It turns out that being a carrier for sickle cell, having just 1 copy of the gene, makes you highly resistant to malaria. Here's how it works. A person with 2 normal copies of the hemoglobin gene has normal blood cells. They don't have sickle cell disease, but they are very vulnerable to malaria. A person with 2 copies of the sickle cell gene has the full-blown disease. They will suffer greatly and, without modern medicine, likely die young. But the person in the middle, the carrier with 1 of each gene, hits a strange genetic jackpot. They have something called sickle cell trait. Their bodies produce both normal and sickle-shaped red blood cells. They usually have few or no symptoms of the disease itself, but when the malaria parasite tries to invade their red blood cells, the cells collapse into the sickle shape, and the body's immune system quickly identifies and destroys them, parasite and all. In a place where malaria is rampant, being a carrier is a huge advantage. You're much more likely to survive to adulthood and have kids than people with normal blood cells who might die from malaria. You are also, obviously, much more likely to survive than people with sickle cell disease. So, in this specific environment, natural selection actively favors the carriers. It selects for the sickle cell gene even though it's lethal in a double dose. The gene causes a deadly disease, but it also provides a life-saving benefit. It's a trade-off, a compromise. Evolution doesn't find the perfect solution of getting rid of malaria. Instead, it settles for the good enough solution of keeping a protective, but potentially dangerous, gene circulating in the population. Scientists suspect this same logic applies to other diseases. There's evidence to suggest that being a carrier for cystic fibrosis might have offered some protection against diseases like cholera or typhoid, which cause death through severe dehydration. The faulty gene in CF affects how cells manage chloride in water, and it's possible that having 1 bad copy made it harder for these bacteria to take hold. Similarly, carriers of Tay-Sachs may have had some resistance to tuberculosis. Evolution is full of these messy compromises. A gene is rarely just good or bad. Its value depends entirely on the environment. Another major reason genetic diseases persist is that evolution isn't a process that has an endpoint. It's not like we are fixing a machine and one day it will be perfect. The source of all genetic variation is mutation, random typos that occur when our DNA is copied. And this process never stops. Every single person is born with dozens of brand new mutations that their parents didn't have. But think about the sheer scale of it. Your DNA is a code made of about 3 billion letters. Every time a cell divides, it has to copy all 3 billion of those letters perfectly. It's an incredibly accurate process, but it's not perfect. Mistakes happen. A letter gets swapped, deleted, or inserted. Most of these typos happen in parts of our DNA that don't do much, so they have no effect. Some are harmless, but every so often, a new mutation happens in a critical gene, and it causes a disease. These are called de novo mutations or new mutations. They can cause genetic diseases to appear in a family with no prior history of the condition. Chondroplasia, a common cause of dwarfism, is often the result of a de novo mutation. A large percentage of children with the condition are born to parents of average height who do not have the gene. The mutation simply occurred randomly in the sperm or egg cell that created the child. So even if we could magically cure every single person on Earth of all existing genetic diseases, new ones would start popping up in the very next generation. The process of mutation is constant. It's the engine of evolution. It creates the variation that allows species to adapt. But it's a double-edged sword. That same process inevitably creates harmful variations as well. We can't have one without the other. There is no final perfected version of the human genome. It's a dynamic, ever-changing document constantly being edited with new random changes. On top of all this, we have to remember that natural selection isn't all-powerful. It only acts on things that make a real difference to survival and reproduction. For selection to be strong, the trait has to have a significant impact, but not all genetic conditions are a death sentence. Some are just inconvenient, some only cause mild problems, some only become problems in our strange modern world. Think about something like nearsightedness or myopia. It has a strong genetic component. In our evolutionary past, on the African savanna, being severely nearsighted would have been a huge disadvantage. You wouldn't be able to spot a predator from a distance or find fairway food sources. There would have been strong selection pressure against it, but what about being just a little bit nearsighted? It probably didn't make much of a difference. And today, in a world with optometrists and eyeglasses and contact lenses, there is zero selection pressure against it. A person with terrible vision can function perfectly well, survive, and have as many kids as anyone else. The same goes for lactose intolerance. We often think of it as a disorder, but it's actually the original default human condition. For most of our history, humans stopped producing the enzyme to digest milk after they were weaned as children. It was only after some groups of humans started domesticating cattle that a mutation for lactase persistence, the ability to digest milk into adulthood, popped up and became a huge advantage. In those cultures, it spread like wildfire. But in places where dairy farming wasn't common, there was no advantage. So most of the world's population remains, to this day, lactose intolerant. Or is it a disease or just a genetic variation that's inconvenient in a world full of cheese and ice cream? The environment defines the problem. Our modern lifestyle exposes all sorts of genetic predispositions that were never an issue before. The genes that might have been fine in a hunter-gatherer who ate a lean diet and was constantly active can become problematic in a modern human who is sedentary and eats processed foods. This can lead to things like type 2 diabetes or heart disease. The genes haven't changed. The environment has. And evolution hasn't had time to catch up to our radical, lightning-fast changes in diet and lifestyle. We are running ancient software on modern hardware, and it's creating all sorts of new bugs. Finally, there's the simple, chaotic element of pure chance. Not everything in evolution happens for a reason. Sometimes a gene becomes common in a population just by dumb luck. This is called genetic drift. Imagine a small group of people sets off to colonize a new island. Just by chance, one of the founders happens to be a carrier for a rare recessive disease. In the large population they came from, that gene was incredibly rare. But on this new island, this one person is a significant fraction of the new gene pool. As the population grows, that rare gene can become much, much more common in their descendants, not because it provides any advantage, but simply because it was there at the beginning. This is known as the founder effect. It explains why certain genetic diseases are extraordinarily common in specific isolated populations. For example, Ellis-Van Creveld syndrome, a form of dwarfism, is very rare in the world, but it's common among the Old Order Amish of Pennsylvania because they are all descended from a few hundred German founders, and one of them happened to carry the gene. Similarly, Ashkenazi Jewish populations have high rates of certain genetic diseases like Tay-Sachs and Gaucher disease, likely because their population went through bottlenecks, times when the population was very small and the genes of the few survivors became widespread, whether they were helpful or not. In these cases, selection was not the primary driver. Chance was. It was a genetic lottery. It's another reminder that evolution isn't a neat and tidy process of optimization. It's messy, random, and shaped by the quirks of history. Genes can be carried along for the ride, spreading through a population for no other reason than they were in the right place at the right time. So, when we ask why evolution hasn't gotten rid of genetic diseases, the answer is that the question is based on a false premise. It assumes evolution is a system designed for our health and happiness. It's not. It's a system designed for one thing and one thing only, the transmission of genes. And it will use any means necessary to achieve that end. It will let a killer gene slide through if it waits until after you've had kids. It will allow a terrible disease to persist if it can hide in the bodies of healthy carriers. It will even actively promote a gene that causes a deadly illness if, in some circumstances, it also provides an even greater survival advantage. It is constantly being undermined by new mutations that create new problems, and it's too weak to bother with minor flaws that don't stop us from having kids. And sometimes it just lets random chance call the shots. The diseases written in our DNA are not a sign that evolution has failed. They are a record of our history. They tell a story of ancient plagues, of migrations into new lands, of compromises made in the face of environmental threats, and of the constant, relentless ticking of random mutation. They are a testament to the messy, imperfect, and deeply fascinating process that made us who we are. We are not perfect machines, we are survivors cobbled together from a long line of ancestors who were just good enough to make it. And our genetic flaws are an inseparable part of that inheritance.